Yeah, and thank you everybody for being here today on this beautiful Saturday. I'm excited to chat with you about one of my favorite birds. Obviously, I've been working with them for about 14 years, so this bird is very near and dear to my heart, so I'm really excited to chat with you today about them. Oh, okay, you're gonna get the lens. So I'm sure most of you know this about condors, but I figured I would give just a little primer about their background. So what is a California condor? California condors are the largest flying land bird of North America. They have a 9.5-foot wingspan. So that's me in the middle, and that's a condor flying next to me. I'm 5'3", so you can see just how big that bird is. And that large wingspan is very useful for the condors. They are obligate scavengers, so they use their large wingspan to soar large distances looking for food that is sporadically and sparsely situated throughout the landscape. You know, they don't know where they're gonna be, so they need those large wingspans to soar around, look for food without expending too much energy. So they are scavengers, and they are obligate scavengers, meaning they only eat animals that have already died. In that way, they are nature's cleanup crew, and they help recycle nutrients back into the land, into the ecosystem, and clean up our environment so that we don't have to see all these carrion out on the landscape. Condors are also a very social bird, and that also helps being scavengers, so they can pass information to each other. It's a lot easier to follow a bird to a known food source than it is to go find it yourself. So condors are very social. They have a little social hierarchy. The adults will sometimes, you know, beat up the younger ones and get the prime pickings of carcasses. But where you see one condor, you're more likely to see more in just a little bit. Condors are also monogamous for the most part, meaning they have long-standing pairs. Of course, like most animals that are monogamous, there can be some drama in the condor world where there are divorces and shakeups. There are several birds in the California population that have trios, so they're actually polyamorous. In Central California, we have found that for some reason, they usually have more female trios, and then down in Southern California, we tend to have more male-female trios. And they are also, another reason sometimes they're not monogamous is because, unfortunately, sometimes the adults will die, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But they are a long-lived species, supposed to be a long-lived species. We've been giving out these awesome stickers that say happy birthday, Topa Topa. He is the oldest living condor that we know of. He was trapped in the wild in 1966 as a chick and brought to the LA Zoo, and he has been a captive breeder ever since. He's 60 and he is still actively breeding. He actually got a new mate just this year who is 6 years old. So quite the May-December relationship, but Topa Topa is doing fantastic. So happy birthday to Topa. So yeah, they're long-lived, but unfortunately we don't really know how old they can be in the wild. They usually die before they reach old age in the wild, unfortunately. The oldest condor in the wild is Condor 20. He's in our Southern California flock. He was one of the original adult condors trapped in the wild in the 80s. And he is estimated to be 49. 46, sorry. So it's believed that condors used to range throughout North America back during the Pleistocene era. They would feed on woolly mammoths, ground sloths, anything saber-toothed cats might bring down. But when the Holocene extinction happened, the condors shifted their range to just the western part of North America, from Baja, California, up to British Columbia. But previously, there have been fossils found throughout the US, all the way from Florida, New York, and then the southern southwest. Sorry, I'm getting a little cold, so my brain's a little foggy here. By the 1800s, condors only ranged in the western US, and Lewis and Clark have one of the earliest reported observations, and they collected a California condor in the Columbia River Gorge in 1806. But by the 1900s, the condor population had really diminished to just California. And by 1953, when Carl Cofer did the first condor survey, he estimated that there were already only 200 condors in the wild. And by 1965, the condor population seemed to only occupy this horseshoe range in California. And I got to meet Carl Cofer for the first time last year. It was really awesome. And he's actually the one who caught topa topa in the wild. So why did the condor population decline? Well, condors were shot out of curiosity. Obviously, they're very large birds, and people were trying to study them and have them in their scientific collections. They were also, people also collected their eggs. Condors have a nice big egg. They're not quite as big as the ostrich, but they have nice big eggs. And so they were prized specimens for egg collectors. There are condor skins here in the museum, and then there are also some up in Santa Barbara Natural History Museum as well. And people also would capture condor for pets or for displays in zoos. And then during the 1840s, there was the big gold rush in California. So a lot of people started settling in California and mistaking condors for birds of prey that were eating their livestock, not understanding that the condors were actually eating already dead livestock. So condors were shot, thinking that they were nuisance animals, and then they also were secondarily poisoned by strychnine. A lot of settlers put strychnine in some baited carcasses for bigger predators like mountain lions, wolves, and bears. And so condors would also fall prey to that. And then, of course, development. Millions of acres of habitat were destroyed by human development. And because of all these pressures, diseases, and poisonings, the condor population couldn't sustain itself. Because they're long-lived species, they have a long reproductive cycle, and they only have one chick every other year if they nest successfully. So the condor population just couldn't sustain itself. By 1982, the condor population plummeted to just 22 individuals. And 22, that's how many condors are in this image. This one has 2 in there, so if you're looking for the math, you're like, the math's not mathing. There are 2 in that first one. So I don't know, compare that to how many people are in this room right now. It's probably fairly similar, maybe even a little less.
Are most of those birds still alive?
Unfortunately, no. I'm not sure how many are alive off the top of my head. I'd have to look that up, but that's a good question. And then by 1987, all of the birds were caught in the wild and brought into captivity for a captive breeding program to save the species. And then in 1988, the first pair of wild-trapped birds produced an egg in captivity. And back in the day, because we were trying to save every single condor that we could, it was very intensive, and we hand puppet reared a lot of the chicks to ensure their survival, and also to prompt the adults to double clutch. So we would take one egg that the pair had laid, and we would hand rear them, and then that would spur that pair to lay another egg, and that helped us to produce a lot of condors from the captive program. And that's something we still do today, is try to induce, second or even third clutches of condor eggs. And the captive breeding program is doing some really cool stuff where they're even experimenting with having one pair raise 2 chicks at the same time, and so far it has been very successful. So hopefully we can have some more increased productivity so that we can release birds in the wild. And we have been releasing birds into the wild since 1992. Our first release sites were down here in Southern California through the Hopper Mountain National Wildlife Refuge and Refuge Complex now. So birds are released today out of Bitter Creek, Big Sur, and San Simeon, California. Those birds are managed by Ventana Wildlife Society. There are birds released at Pinnacles National Park, the Vermilion Cliffs in Arizona, and those birds go from Arizona to Utah. They are managed by the Peregrine Fund. And then they're also released in Baja, California. There's a small population there. And then lastly, the newest release site is up in Northern California, and that is co-managed by the Yurok tribe and the National Park Service. And you'll see that this range has a little hash mark on it because it's not quite established yet. There's only, I believe, 17 birds up there, and they're going to be 25 now? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Maria. There are 25 birds up there now. And they are, you might have seen in the news that they had some potential nesting happening earlier this year, but it seems to have failed. So hopefully in the next few years they'll have some successful nesting, but they will continue to release birds out there. So how do we release them? Well, we get captive bred birds from different breeding sites. They breed them at the Los Angeles Zoo, the San Diego Zoo, Oregon Zoo, the center, the World Center for Birds of Prey in Idaho, and then also down at the Chapultepec Zoo in Baja. So depending on how many chicks are bred and grown in captivity, that explains how many birds we get to release into the wild. So it varies year by year. We do try to release birds into areas where they can contribute more to the genetic diversity. So the captive breeders are, they put together the pairs in captivity based off of genetics to make sure that we have as much genetic diversity in the wild as we can. As you know, there were only 22 birds that were captured in the wild, so we got to make sure that there aren't some negative effects to all of that breeding. So we get the birds, and then we'll put them in this flight pen for a couple of months so that they can become acclimated to their environment and meet wild birds without being directly out with them. And we also will put them, we'll also put a mentor bird in the flight pen with them. And this mentor bird is a wild bird that we'll trap. And it helps teach the captive bred condors what it means to condors. So they learn about the social hierarchy, and if there is a predator outside, they'll hopefully already have the innate instinct to hop off the ground, but if not, their mentor bird is there to teach them that and how to feed on the food that we give them and everything. And in this picture is a good example of the different colorations of the condors. So you'll see that the juveniles have this brownish coloration on their feathers, and their heads are black-gray. And then as they get older, they get their pinkish-orange coloration on their head, and their coverts become bright white, whereas when they're young, they're still dark gray. And yeah, so thanks to the breeding and reintroduction efforts, the condor population has gone from this, just 22 individuals, to this. So now there are about 392 condors in the wild. That was the count at the end of 2025. So things have definitely changed since then, but that is the official number from the end of the year. There are 390 condors here, so it's just a visual representation. And then there are an additional 215 condors in captivity. So that's all great, right? Like, presentation's done, the condors are recovered. I wish that was the case, but while the population has greatly increased, it still faces many issues. One is the main threat to their survival today is lead poisoning from the ingestion of spent ammunition. So this is a radiograph of the first bird that I actually ever saw with lead poisoning, and it was absolutely heartbreaking, but we were able to go out and capture it with a net and bring it to actually a private exotic veterinarian in Monterey. I don't remember why. Usually we bring them to the LA Zoo. But anyway, this is a radiograph of that bird, and you can see that there's a big lead slug in there, and then some smaller fragments right here. And I'll talk a little bit more about lead in just a little bit. And then another issue that we're having in Southern California is just we're not having as much wild reproduction as we think we should be having. Yeah. So lead is a soft metal, and it's also toxic to most animals and living things. As far as I know, it's toxic to all, but if anybody knows of anything different, please let me know. And the problem with it being soft is that it will fracture and fragment into a bunch of really small pieces when it hits an animal, and especially when it hits bone. And there are studies that show that these lead fragments can travel up to 14 inches away from the bullet path. and that there are also many teeny tiny fragments that aren't even captured from radiographs. So, condors can't pick out that lead when they're feeding on these carrion that they're finding out in the wild. And so they're eating it, and then they get sick, and we have to scoop them up and hopefully get them the care that they need in order to survive. But we'll talk a little bit more about lead again in a second. But if you want more information, a good resource is huntingwithnonlead.org, and that is where I pulled these images. So reintroduction is just one tool within the recovery toolbox. It can do a lot for us, like you saw between those two pictures of the condor population in the 80s to now. The population has greatly increased because of reintroduction, but there is a lot more that we do to help this species recover. So the objective of the Condor Recovery Program is to downlist the species from critically endangered to threatened. And the criteria that we need to have to downlist is have 2 distinct populations that have at least 150 individuals and 15 breeding pairs that, and the populations need to be self-sustaining. And then those populations need to be spatially disjunct. And so when we look at the numbers, we have about almost 400 in the wild. So numbers-wise, pairs-wise, we should be meeting that goal, right? But the problem that we're running into is that the populations are not self-sustainable. So those populations, the numbers are really only because we're still doing those reintroductions. And so some of the actions that the recovery plan outlined to try to meet that criteria is to establish a captive breeding program, reintroduce condors to the wild, minimize mortality factors, maintain habitat for condor recovery, and implement condor information and education programs. And so with the Hopper Mountain Condor Recovery Program, we really focus on the reintroducing condors, minimizing mortality factors, and implementing condor information and education. So a little bit about the complex. The Hopper Mountain National Wildlife Refuge Complex is a unit of 4 wildlife refuges managed by the Fish and Wildlife Service, and 3 of those refuges were created for condor recovery and conservation. And so those refuges are Bitter Creek, Hopper, and Blue Ridge. But I'm really gonna focus on Hopper and Bitter Creek. These are the 2 refuges that we really do our management activities out of. Hopper is also adjacent to the Condor Sanctuary in the Sespe area, Los Padres National Forest. So it's a great area with a lot of designated habitat for condors. And like I said, Bitter Creek is the refuge that we release condors out of now, but we used to release them out of Hopper as well. Hopper was established in 1974 to protect condors, its habitat, and other wildlife resources, but Hopper is where there's a lot of nesting activity for condors. And then Bitter Creek has some nesting areas, but it's really more of a foraging landscape for condors. It has nice rolling grassy hills, there's a lot of deer and elk that can naturally die and feed condors, but then there's also a lot of grazing up in that area. And so, yeah, like I said, a lot more goes into species recovery than just the reintroduction. And this is our conceptual overview for field operations. for condor recovery. So these are the threats that we address through these 7 management actions. So the actions are monitoring habitat and resource use, lead monitoring and treatment, nest management, behavioral modification, and outreach, and then obviously detecting mortalities and captive releases. So I'll go through that a little bit more. And because there still are so few condors in the wild, they're all tracked in one way or another. For the most part, there are a handful of wild fledged condors that are out there that have no tags, no transmitters, and that is the goal, that we want to see more of those birds out in the wild. But for now, we try to track every single one of them. And we track them using different means. Radio telemetry, we have a good amount of our birds wearing GPS units, in-person observations. We also really appreciate photos and videos of condors that people see out in the wild. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. For monitoring habitat and resource use, we really rely on VHF radio telemetry and GPS. This is one of our old technicians doing some radio telemetry. So each condor will get a transmitter, and this is one example of them. It's a tail transmitter, so it's really small. We affix it to the actual feather itself. And these transmitters have their own frequency, kind of like a radio station frequency. And so using this receiver and Yagi antenna, we try to get a signal from as many condors as we can. So standing out on a high mountaintop and just doing a 360-degree sweep for every single one of these transmitters and every single frequency. So it can be a little tedious and time-consuming, but it really helps us find birds in real time. It will help give you a direction of where the condor signal is coming from, and then you can get your binoculars or scope and try to find them that way. These transmitters are also super important for helping us find mortalities. So when a bird has been stationary for 8 hours, the transmitter will actually give off a rapid pulse, and that indicates to us that a condor is sick, injured, or dead. And so we can go out and try to find that bird and get it either to a zoo for treatment, or we can hopefully send it to the National Fish and Wildlife Forensics Lab so they can do a necropsy and tell us what happened. Of course, sometimes it's a dropped tail feather, and that is the issue with these transmitters. Sometimes, condors shed their feathers every 2 years about, and they can also drop them after stressful events. So after a handling where we put on this transmitter, a condor might just decide, I'm stressed, and drop that feather, and then we get all of our alarms, all of our alarm bells are going off. We think this bird's dead, but it's actually just a tail transmitter that has dropped. So that is one tool that we use to monitor the birds, but then we also have birds wearing GPS units, and we try to have every condor wearing at least one radio transmitter and a GPS, but sometimes birds can't wear GPS units just based on their wing piercings. Sometimes if it gets too big, then we'll take that off. But the GPS units are really helpful in showing long-term trends of condors. So this is the condor range last year. It was about 13,000 square kilometers. So these are our two little refuges that we manage the condors out of, and this is the entire area that they use throughout the year. The warmer areas are hotspots, so those are the locations that the condors really love to go to year-round, but they'll go all the way up to Sequoia and Kings Canyon. A few years ago, we had birds go all the way up to Yosemite National Park. So the birds are really expanding their range, and GPS can help us see where the birds are hanging out and spending time. And if we get a mortality signal, we can see if the bird has GPS, and if the bird's still moving around, then we can pretty much guarantee that the mortality signal that we heard was a drop-tail transmitter. But what's super exciting lately is that the birds have really been spending a lot of time in the Sequoia National Forest, where they historically used to nest in old grove sequoia trees. And last year we got some reports of birds up in those trees, and so now we're waiting for them to start nesting up in that area again. It would be the first time in many, many years.
So once they leave a particular area and they go up to is that kind of where they end up staying, or do they travel back down? I mean, is there a...
Yeah, that's a good question. They like to spend their most of the time in these like hotter areas, but they will go up and down usually during the warmer months when there's good thermals for them to travel. We find that usually in the winter is when they're most around our refuges. And because we're still trapping them for management reasons, which I'll talk about in a second, we do put bait out for the birds, and because we still are releasing birds out into the wild from captivity, that attracts those things attract the birds back to our release sites. So who knows, if we weren't releasing birds and weren't feeding out, would they stay up there? Maybe.
I have a question. Does that activity to you, does that look like that reaches Pinnacles?
No, it doesn't quite reach Pinnacles. Pinnacles is all the way up here, but
Yeah.
I have another map closer to the end of my presentation, and it'll show some of the central Southern California merging.
Okay.
But yeah, this large range makes it very difficult for us to track the birds all the time. And so we're trying to pull in partnership with the Tule River tribe and hopefully get them to be a satellite monitoring resource for us. So stay tuned. Hopefully we'll have some Tule River tribe people doing presentations in the future. And then these are just photos that we have received from the public. So like I said, receiving reports from people who see condors in the wild is really helpful for us because we can't monitor the birds throughout their entire range. And these sightings can really help us see what other issues are out there for condors. So this Condor 98 actually broke his leg a few years ago, and we had reports of him flying around with a broken leg. We tried to find him, and we were unsuccessful, and so we were assuming that the leg might fall off like it did with another bird up in Central California, but miraculously we got photos and videos of this bird several months later, and he was putting weight on his leg, and it seemed totally fine. It's just a little askew. And then we also get lots of sightings and reports of birds picking up trash at some known dump sites, and knowing about it helps us identify things that we need to do to help keep those areas clear. So we still do lead monitoring and treatment, of course. How do we do that? We actually will bait these giant traps with food that we get. Right now it's from Costco, so I will tell you more about that later. But we'll put out bait for the birds, and we'll have a biologist in a blind that's connected to the trap. They'll wait for our birds to come in, and then we'll shut this trap door and then open another trap door that's like right over here. And that second trap door opens up to the release or into our flight pen. And then once a week, once that flight pen is full, we'll do a workup where we collect, we'll do health checks on the birds. We'll collect some blood. So we'll send the blood to the California Health and Food Safety Lab at UC Davis and test the blood and get a snapshot of what their blood lead is at that time. We'll also collect feathers growing feathers from some of the birds, and that will give us a 2-month-long timeline of lead exposure through the feathers. And then we'll also do, regular health checks. We'll switch out their vinyl tags and their transmitters, and swab for highly pathogenic avian influenza. And if a bird comes in that's exhibiting lead poisoning symptoms, or if we get a mort signal and we find that the bird is down but not dead and it's having some issues standing, it's really discombobulated and lethargic, we'll try to net that bird and bring it down, usually to the LA Zoo for chelation treatment. And so that is the same treatment humans would get. It's a series of calcium EDTA injections with a lot of supportive fluids so that hopefully the bird can survive. For very severe cases, condors will get what's called crop stasis, where their GI tract is actually paralyzed, and so the birds can starve to death, and it's really, really, really sad and horrible. But the zoos can actually do surgery to help treat that crop stasis and then also remove any lead fragments if the condor has any. So lead, we know that it's still an issue, but there's also been a lot of legislation in California to ban lead from hunting. And so why are the condors still getting it? And are they still getting it? So these are, this is just a graph of some of our blood lead levels over the past 5 years. And you can see from 2021 forward, our condor blood lead levels have really shifted from lower subclinical levels to more clinical severe lead poisoning levels over the years. And in 2019, that's when the AB 711 legislation was fully enacted, and that bans the take of any wildlife with lead throughout the state, not just in condor areas. So what's going on there? Well, there was a paper published recently, just this year, that investigated are the bans and is lead outreach helping reduce lead poisoning in condors, or what's going on? And so what they found was the lead ban and condor outreach actually is helping reduce condor lead poisoning, but because condors are expanding their range and feeding on other things, their lead is still increasing. So lead from deer hunting has drastically decreased, and this figure shows with higher interpretive, like non-lead interpretive contacts, and with more boxes of lead-free ammo that is given away to hunters and ranchers, blood lead levels go significantly down. So these are like really wonky graphs, but essentially this is boxes of ammo given away and then amount of contacts, and it goes higher down to the bottom, and then the blood lead levels go lower this way. So with fewer boxes of ammo given and fewer contacts, there's more lead poisoning. So it seems that the legislation is working for some species, but not for others. And because condors are feeding on more things outside of areas that that our partners are doing non-lead outreach, it seems like that's where they're picking up more lead, if that makes sense. Okay. So that's something that we're very much working on. But other things that we do at Hopper is behavioral modification. So we have these mock power lines outside and inside our flight pens. Because condors have such a large wingspan, if they land on a power pole, they could create a ground and electrocute themselves. So we put these mock power lines by the flight pens and in the flight pens, so that if condors land on it, they get a little shock, not enough to hurt them, but enough for them to realize this is not the kind of perch I'm trying to sit on right now. Other behavioral modification actions that we do is recapturing released birds that are not thriving out in the wild. So just this last year, we had to do that for a condor that had a bout of bad luck and found itself in this little valley gully that got socked in by fog immediately, and so he had no perches anywhere near and no birds to follow because he couldn't see the sky. So for birds that aren't thriving out in the wild or seem too habituated to humans, we will actually retrap them and bring them back into captivity to get a little bit more mentoring from captive birds. And then one last thing that we do is hazing birds. So this is actually a flyer that we'll put out to some of the rural communities where our condors really love to hang out and have deck parties on people's property. And we do encourage people to haze the birds and discourage them from landing. So you can clap at them, yell at them, spray a water hose at them and try to just discourage them from landing. So that's something that we do out in rural communities, but also on Refuge. If a bird is landing on a structure like oil rigs that we have, we'll try to flush them off of that as well. We also do a lot of nest management, which is one of the bigger parts of our program and one of the most fun and probably it's also very physically challenging. So because all of the birds have transmitters and because we know the age of all of the birds, we can estimate when they will breed and then where they are nesting. So in the early winter, we'll start watching for birds and seeing if they're showing signs of pairing up. So that means pair flying together. They'll like nuzzle together and the males will start displaying to the females. So when we get observations of that, we'll watch them very closely and try to find their nest cavities. And so this is just one example of finding those cavities. So this right here is the entrance to one condor nest. And as you see, there's just the tiniest little beak that you can see, and that's how we found this nest. And this circle is this red circle. So this is taken from the OP. This is the true view of it, and then this is through the scope. So it can be very challenging, and we'll observe those nests. And we do this because, like I said, one of the limiting factors to the Condor program in the recovery is low reproductive success. And so when the first few nests were laid in the wild, there was a very low nest success rate. It was only between 2001 and 2006, there was only a 12.5% nest success compared to a 36% nest success during the same time period in Arizona, and then compared to the remnant population back in the 80s that were studied. And because of that, we really tried to figure out what's going on. And we found that a lot of the failures were attributed to predation, chick and egg abnormalities, just some first pair awkwardness, like first timers just not quite getting parenting correct. But the main factor in those nest failures was micro trash ingestion. So these are actually items that were collected from a condor chick's stomach, and then here's a picture, sorry, it's a very graphic, of a different chick with micro trash in its stomach. And we think that the birds are bringing back these bottle caps, glass, gaskets, little bits of trash, mistaking them for pieces of shell and bone that they would feed to their chicks to supplement for calcium. Because condors are scavengers, they don't have a lot of calcium in their diet naturally, so they supplement that by giving bones and shells to their chick, but mistaking these pieces of microtrash for that. So where are the birds getting it, you might ask? Well, there are lots of dump sites. Careful, there's like cords. Okay, you got it. Okay. So they're finding it at some of these dump sites that become very popular and established. And these dump sites are very attractive to condors. They're very curious individuals, and so they'll go and pick things up out there. But luckily, we work really closely with folks, and because we get lots of reports and photos and videos of birds with trash, that allows us to take action. So we work really closely with the Forest Service to clean up some of those sites, and they have really helped to reduce the micro trash out on the landscape. And we actually did one just last month for Earth Day. And so the micro trash issue is much less of a problem than it was back in the day. But we still find trash in almost every nest that we enter. But yeah, before we got a handle on microtrash, we really wanted to figure out what was happening and try to increase wild reproduction. So we started the nest guarding program with the Santa Barbara Zoo. And this was a very intensive nest management program that consisted of intensive observations and nest management actions. And we still use some of the aspects of it today, but back then we would observe the nest from dusk to dawn and enter their nest every 30 days to check the egg, sift out trash. We also would replace infertile eggs with dummy eggs and then replace the dummy egg with a pipping egg from captivity, or just a chick from captivity to get the parents to wild fledge a condor. But we don't quite do that anymore. So now we just, we do a lot of in-person observations, and then we also will install nest cameras to try so that we can observe and monitor the nest remotely. It's a lot of hard work going out into the backcountry, hauling out heavy gear and cameras and solar panels. But the results are very rewarding. So this is a chick that's like laying down with its cute little legs splayed out. And so when we install those cameras, it gives us a good idea of condor nesting behavior, and then it also helps us see, if there is a failure, what happened, and can we go collect any sort of evidence to get a sense of why it failed. We still also do nest entries. So we observe the nest every 30 days and just try to get a sense of if the nest is still active, if the parents are still attending it, and if the chick is alive, does it look good? And then we will do just a couple of nest entries a year. Mostly we'll do one when the chick is about 30 days old. We'll go into the nest if we can and candle the egg and see if it's viable. So you can see in this picture, this egg is nice and viable. It has some veins that are helping, give blood to the growing chick. And then if it is fertile, then we will leave the egg. If it's infertile, we will take the egg and send it to the San Diego Zoo for an egg necropsy, and hopefully encourage the pair to double clutch. But yeah, if it's fertile, then we'll leave it, and then we'll do those 30-day observations, and then around 120 days, when the chick's 120 days, we'll enter the nest again and give the chick its identifying tags, a VHF transmitter. We'll give it a West Nile virus vaccination, and just do an overall health check and make sure that it's still developing well. And we try to get into the nest at 120 days because the condor is big enough where we can tag it without hurting it, but it's not old enough or developed enough to fly away. And yeah, we'll observe the birds up until they fledge, and we'll use many different technologies. So this is just in person, but the Santa Barbara Zoo is also experimenting using drones to monitor some of those cavities that are hard to see into. And so this is just a test flight. This is that same chick that you just saw on that last slide. but this is using some thermal imaging, and you can see that there's just this cute little chick in there. So we're experimenting with some new technologies. So does nest management work? Yes. Since the nest guarding program, we've had a lot better nest success. So green is successful, purple is unsuccessful. You can see that there's still many, many unsuccessful nests. And so that is something that we are still investigating, trying to get into the we're trying to identify the nests as early as possible, and see if it's a problem during egg stage or chick stage or later on. So that's kind of where we are right now. But the microtrash issue is luckily not so much of a problem anymore. And now we have about 30% of our flock that's wild fledged. So that's super exciting. Hopefully we can get it up to baseline historic nesting, which we think is around 40 to 50%. Of course, one of the big management actions that we do is mortality monitoring and recovery. So that is, like I said, one of the main reasons we still have all of our birds wearing transmitters and GPS tags, is so that when the condors do unfortunately die, we can hopefully get them recover their carcasses as soon as possible and send them to the forensics lab, and get a cause of death. And as you see, lead poisoning is responsible for 50% of all known condor deaths. Even with the huge avian influenza outbreak in Arizona, that's still only 10% of known condor deaths is due to disease or infection. Lead is still the great hurdle that we're trying to recover. And it's definitely the worst part of the job. Condors don't usually die in easy locations. You have to go out and hike and then collect them, but it's one of the most important things, because if we don't know what's killing the condors, how are we supposed to mitigate for that? And it's also really important because a lot of people don't know that lead is still an issue for wildlife and condors. A lot of people are like, well, isn't there a ban on lead ammo in California? And yes, there is, but the condors are still dying from it. So it's super important for us to still be doing this collection and getting the data from these mortalities. And that is also why outreach and education is super important for us. People can't make change if they don't know about it, and I also think, people can't care about what they don't know about. So I just want to take a second and thank you all for coming and learning about condors, because maybe you didn't know about the condors before, or you didn't know what their threats were, and now you do. So thank you very much. But outreach and education is super important, and we partner with a lot of different organizations that help us do this outreach and education. So we partner with the Institute for Wildlife Studies, and they go throughout California and do shooting demos to different sportsmen, and they show the difference between shooting with lead ammunition versus lead-free ammo. And in this photo, you can actually see there's a rifle and a scope set up, and then down the line, there's actually a couple of water barrels, and they'll shoot these ballistic gels, and it'll show the impact and fragmentation between both. And you can see that a lead bullet has all these fragments coming off of it, whereas a non-lead-free will just mushroom and retain like 90+% of their mass.
Where are the hunters getting the lead ammunition? Online?
Lead is still sold in stores in person. So you can still get lead ammo, and in fact, it's actually very difficult to find lead-free ammo right now as well. So it is illegal to take wildlife with lead ammunition, but you can still use it for target shooting.
So then they're cheating.
Well, that's the thing. We can't say if people are cheating. You know, most people want to follow the law, and it could just be, you know, ignorance. Like they just don't know that they're supposed to be shooting like ground squirrels or pigs or whatnot with non-lead, and then some people just can't get lead in right now, or can't get lead-free ammo right now. There's a ammunition shortage, and it can be very challenging to get. But that's why doing outreach is very important. There's also the North American Lead-Free Partnership, and they do a lot of outreach and education throughout the United States. And they're super knowledgeable. They are hunters and conservationists going out and speaking to the audiences that I can't speak to as just a biologist. And yeah, hunters are super valuable to conservation, so they're not the enemy. We want to work with them. Hunters and ranchers keep the landscape undeveloped. They also contribute to conservation through taxes on ammunition and guns and hunting tags. So working with the hunting and ranching community is super important. And the thing is, you want them to buy into the lead-free and not feel forced to do it. And these folks are way better at speaking to that audience than I am.
Question.
Yeah.
So my recollection is that for waterfowl, they banned lead many, many years ago.
They did. Mm-hmm.
Are there any comparisons for how long it took for that ban to really affect bird populations compared to this? I mean, is it taking longer with this change, or is it kind of on track and it just is a really slow progression?
My understanding and impression is that there was more buy-in from waterfowl hunters because of the implications of downstream, like of secondary water, or people getting it from the water and having it in the water. That's my understanding. And then I think now it's just a very slow progression. Change is very hard for people sometimes. Hunting is very rooted in tradition, and that can be a hard thing to change, especially when there isn't a lot of information and when it's hard to even get lead-free ammunition.
Why is it hard to get the lead-free ammunition? What are the?
Yeah.
It's what?
It's not being manufactured in some calibers, especially
Mm-hmm.
22 gauge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People shooting ground squirrels, gophers,
Yeah, and it's just also, oh my God, I just lost my train of thought. Yes, question.
As somebody who grew up traditionally hunting, a couple different perspectives. Ammunition lasts like a long time, so if you have a box of shotgun shells or whatever, that's going to be around for a long time. That's going to drag out your
Yes.
effectiveness horizon.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that a lot of people reload their own ammunition from stocks of whatever, and the inert part of that is the lead or the pellets or whatever.
I've spoken to hunters who reload their own non-lead bullets.
Right. All I'm saying is that there's this existing.
There's a
inventory
legacy.
that can take decades.
Yeah.
Literally decades to get rid of.
And there's also, hunting ammunition, lead-free ammunition is a very small part of the manufacturer's product. So they're making their money on, target shooting or like handguns or whatnot, Sorry, what was that? Yes. Versus, making sure that they have enough lead-free, it can be more expensive to manufacture and purchase as well. So it's not very incentivized for the manufacturers at this moment. Yes.
Another thing I wanted to mention is that when you were showing the fragmentation of the lead as it goes through the body and whatever, I was sitting there just absolutely shocked because when I was growing up, we would go out and shoot animals, and then we would eat them. And we would avoid the known areas because you can see it. But I didn't realize
How far?
fragmented that badly. I'm just absolutely shocked.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's probably still in me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might break your tooth. But yeah, and that's why this, doing this education and outreach is so important. Is like, you don't know until you see those fragments so far away from that bullet path.
It's really compelling.
Yeah.
I saw a picture of Fish and Wildlife took packages of frozen venison from hunters' freezers and x-rayed it. You can see all the speckles
Yeah.
in the frozen
Oh, I'd
venison.
love to see, yeah.
Yeah.
That was really,
Exactly.
Because even with frozen, they have already pre-screened it.
Yeah. Question.
Okay, so we're assuming that a lot of hunters and their families are eating lead fragments. Has anybody done any kind of a study on the children of hunters in terms of, the effects of that potential lead in their diet, depending on how much, wild game they eat per year?
There has not, but I imagine it would be very difficult to get people to participate in that type of study. Telling people that they're poisoning their children is not going to go. Sometimes it can be a huge eye opener, but most of the times that's going to get a very defensive reaction. So that's why the non-lead or this North American lead-free partnership is very good at delivering their message without alienating their audience because they come from that hunting background. They're not going to listen to me, Valley Girl from California, working for the Condor Program. So they're much more expert at that. But yes, yeah.
Arizona has a voluntary non-lead program, right? Does Oregon
Yes, I was going to say the Fish and Wildlife Service actually has some lead-free, voluntary incentives and hunting programs throughout the Western and Midwest regions. In California, we don't have one quite yet, but the Ventana Wildlife Society will give out free ammunition to people in Condor counties, so they're a really great resource as well. But Arizona and Utah, I believe, both have voluntary lead-free hunting incentives.
Not Oregon. Now with Europe.
I don't know off the top of my head. I'll have to look that up. Yeah. Other outreach and education events that we do are sometimes we'll have people come out and film with us. Last year we did a segment with Jeff Corwin for his show, Extraordinary World with Jeff Corwin. You can watch it on Paramount Plus if you want to see me cry. And then, like I said, and then we also have social media. So you can learn about condors and what we're doing through the Condor Cave. This is a Facebook page that we co-manage with the Santa Barbara Zoo. When we do have Nest cameras, we will stream them with Cornell Bird Labs, and the Western Foundation actually helps us kind of channel that stream to the world, so that will give you some good condor content. And then, yeah, I wanted to shout out the Friends group. They have a Facebook and Instagram and YouTube channel where you can watch lectures. And yeah, what's going on in the condor population now in Southern California? With all of those management activities, we now have 98 condors in our flock. And we have one condor down in our flock right now from Central California. He's been hanging out with our birds and feeding in the wild. So we have one bird, 1308, who's a Central California bird with us. About 30% of our birds are wild-fledged, and then we currently have 8 nests, and we are slated to have 10 birds to release this fall. With avian influenza, we were vaccinating all of the birds that we could, at least. Starting in 2024. Luckily, we have not had any positive avian influenza cases in our flock, but the avian influenza is still directly affecting us because it's in the livestock and the dairies that we used to source all of our food from. So we used to be able to get free stillborn calves from dairies, but because of avian influenza, we're no longer able to do so. So right now we are collecting different types of food to feed out to our birds. We work with Ventura brush goats to collect some of their stillborn calves or stillborn goats or dead goats. We also work with some shepherds that will give us stillborns, other landowners and veterinarians that can radiograph wild pigs that were shot on their property with lead-free ammunition, and they'll donate some stuff to us. We also work with other California Fish and Wildlife and other wildlife refuges to collect nutria that they are eradicating. And then our main food source right now is our goats and sheep that we purchase from Costco, or rather the Friends group purchases the lamb and goats for us. And the condors really love it, so thank you very much to the Friends group. And yeah, like I said, we have 8 active nests. So we're monitoring those, and hopefully we'll have some wild chicks out flying. And we're still just working on tracking throughout our really large range. We'll be recruiting for technicians for fall very soon. So if you know any post-undergrad people who want to get their hands on condors and do some condor work, keep their eyes peeled for an announcement by American Conservation Experience. And yeah, what's next for the Condor Program? Well, I think for California, what we're hoping to see is a lot more of this, which is mixing between the Southern California flock and the Central California flock. So Pinnacles is about here, and then the Big Sur release sites are here and here. And so you'll see in San Luis Obispo, there's a lot of birds from both Central California and Southern California hanging out. So I think in the near future, we'll see a lot more of that flock intermixing, and maybe we'll see some nests between the 2 flocks. So that would be really exciting. Maybe a little challenging, but I think we're up for it. And then who knows? I mean, these are some of the partners that are involved with the California Condor Recovery Program. There's a lot of people involved, but we're all working together on some new documents trying to navigate where we're headed to next. So we're all discussing what our goals should be for utilizing the resources that we all collectively have, because, you know, conservation can be on the back burner for many organizations or people. So we're all trying to figure out the best way to pool our resources and give the Condor program and the recovery the best bet. So that's that. And yeah, I just wanted to say thank you again to the Friends of California Condors Wild and Free. They've been really instrumental in doing a lot of our outreach and education, because we're just so short-staffed that we haven't been able to do that on our own. Also been very helpful in getting us some of that clean food that we need to trap condors and feed the captive bred individuals. And so lastly, how you can help. Follow leave no trace principles. Never feed or approach condors. If you do get a sighting in a photo, you can shoot us an email at hoppermountain@fws.gov. We very much appreciate those. If you are a farmer, rancher, or know a farmer or rancher, use non-lead ammunition if you can. And you can volunteer with the Friends group. Some activities that the Friends group does, they help us with refuge projects and work days. Sometimes if we have nests that are more easily accessible, that have observation points that are more easily accessible, we'll have some Friends group volunteers monitor those nests. They do a lot of education and outreach booths. Staffing a view area by our Bitter Creek National Wildlife Refuge. do tours for the public and do presentations like this. We're really, really grateful to the Friends group, so thank you. And you get, all of our refuges are closed to the public, so when you volunteer or do a tour or a work day, you get to get on the refuge, usually see some condors nice and up close, but also just enjoy the scenery. But that's all I have. Thanks. I can take, if there are any more questions.